Today's podcast is presented by Podgo. Podgo is the easiest way for you to monetize your podcast, providing podcasters with a flat rate for ad space so you always know how much you get when you include an ad from Podgo. Apply today to become a member and immediately be connected with advertisers that fit your audience. That's podgo.co at podgo.co. And be sure to add our podcast, The Next Best Bet, in the How Did You Hear About Podgo section of the application. Now, on to episode 71 of The Next Best Bet. I'm Jake Higgins with Brett Levy. As always, typically we're going to be talking about NBA, NHL, MLB lines, the look ahead at the weekend, some UFC. We're not going to be talking about that today, though. Some big news out of the NBA on Wednesday, Brett. The 3 games all got postponed, starting with when the Milwaukee Bucks did not leave their locker room as a protest for Jacob Blake being shot in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe, but you almost sold it short there, Higgins. 3 NBA playoff games postponed.
Playoff games. That is a very good point.
Yeah, playoff games. So that was shocking originally, but it made a very powerful statement. We saw some other teams and leagues follow suit. Originally, the Milwaukee Brewers were first to follow suit, which made sense. Another Wisconsin team, then the WNBA, and then the Seattle Mariners, which you made a great point to me about, and I'm going to let you share that with our listeners.
Yes, and we're going to jump more into this real quick in a few minutes, but let's just go over how we did in episode 70 real quick, Brett. I'm seeing a lot of red. I mean, if I didn't have to bring this up, I wouldn't, but I went 0 for 3 in episode 70. At least you got a win, though.
I got my Levy lock in. That was good. It's always nice, to at least win that one, because it says, we weren't very good at picking, but at least I gave you the right one to tail me on.
If you're going to call it a lock, it's always a little bit more comforting when you get it. That is right. But back into this news out of the NBA, Brett. You're right. The MLS, they postponed 5 games. The WNBA, they postponed their games as well. The MLB, there has been some news from different teams. The Milwaukee Brewers, they postponed their game against the Cincinnati Reds. That was the first news out of baseball. And then the Seattle Mariners game got postponed. And this is mainly because it seems there are 8 black players on the active roster of Seattle, and that is the most black players of any MLB team.
Yeah, and again, like you said, I think this is going to. I think more and more teams are going to hop in on this. I think they're going to make a statement, hey, we're not here to entertain anyone. Look what is happening in the world. But when the Mariners were the second team in baseball, I was kind of curious why. And when you pointed that out to me, it made a lot of sense, Higgins. And good for them for sticking up for what they believe in.
Yes, when the NBA decided to go about this bubble in Orlando, one of the major concerns that was brought up by players was, would this take away from the Black Lives Matter movement and from the protests that had resulted from George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and multiple other names that were gunned down as a form of police brutality or just in terms of systemic racism in general. And so Jacob Blake shot 7 times in the back by police officers from Kenosha, Wisconsin. The police officer's name was just released before we started recording on Wednesday night, Brett. And this presented an opportunity for the players in terms of following through with what they were saying before the bubble of if they are going to have this platform, they want to still use it for social justice. And I'd argue that not playing utilizes this platform almost as much, if not more, as if they had just played and gone about their normal business.
Yeah, I think the players have been doing the best they can to raise awareness. Doc Rivers' statement the other night was incredible. I think the players have done a good job of, when in their interviews, answering questions, and instead of answering the questions, saying, arrest the cops who have killed Breonna Taylor, do this, do that. And When those statements fall on deaf ears, you have to find a new way to make a statement. And the players did that today. And I just want to say really quickly that the WNBA players who showed up in that T-shirt, the T-shirts, the Washington Mystics, what a statement by them! That was beyond powerful. With the 7 bullet holes in the back of the shirt. I mean, if that doesn't speak to you, I don't know.
It speaks for itself, honestly. It was a very, very powerful shirt that those women were wearing. The 7 bullet holes representing Jacob Blake being shot in the back. And the fact that this movement of players sitting out, the only other time that players sat out of an NBA basketball game was in 1961 during an exhibition game when Bill Russell and other players on the Celtics sat out in terms of racial inequality. That shows exactly where we are at, that 50, almost 60 years later, basically, they are still having these protests for racial equality. They are still having these protests against police brutality. And it even comes on the 4-year anniversary of when Colin Kaepernick first knelt on the 49ers sideline during the 2016 NFL preseason. That was August 26th, 2016, and we were recording this. This happened in the NBA on August 26th, 2020. So 4 years since Kaepernick knelt, and it is amazing to see where this movement has grown to in terms of the 4 years since that happened.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to call it a coincidence, but what a coincidence that is. For this historic event to happen on the same day that Colin Kaepernick first knelt and really started this conversation amongst sports fans in America.
Yes, from as you can tell from Brett and I talking about this, we support the players' decision to do this. The Next Best Bet podcast supports the decision to postpone those games on Wednesday and for the social justice movement that is going on that these players are in support of. And instead of hearing two white guys talk about this, it may be more beneficial to hear some of the other words. Brett, you mentioned Doc Rivers. He had some very powerful words on Tuesday. Chris Webber and Kenny Smith, they both said some very poignant things on Wednesday after the game was canceled. Kenny Smith walked off the set. That I've never seen something like that. That to me spoke volumes in a sense. And I would say instead of necessarily just hearing your favorite sports broadcasters or Brett or I or any of us really say it, find the perspective of what the players are saying. I mean, they'll all have microphones in front of them. They'll all have social media. They're using their voices to be heard. Listen to their perspectives and their experiences of what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely important to listen to the people who are trying to speak to us right now. And I've been doing that. The Milwaukee Bucks released this a team statement today after their incident, or not incident, after they, decided not to play for social inequality reasons. And they came out as a team after, and I've worked with Brooke Lopez, I've worked with Wesley Matthews, and I'm super proud of those guys for sticking up for what they believe in.
And Brett, there's a players meeting, team meetings that are going on throughout Wednesday night as the NBA decides the best course to go forward with for this. And as someone that has worked in the NBA, I'm wondering what are your expectations to hear from teams or from players in the next coming days regarding this? And are Wednesday night's postponements probably going to be the only ones we see?
This is all new, Higgins, so no one has any experience with this, but I expect Thursday's games to be postponed as well. And
I'd
we'll
agree with
we'll, we'll
that.
see what happens after that, but I expect it to kind of be across all leagues on Thursday, Higgins. I'd be shocked if anyone plays. I think it'll be kind of a blackout day, and you'll almost be forced to watch the news.
I think it is important to remember during times like this that sports are entertainment. They're a commodity. They are by no means a necessity. And as much as during this pandemic we love to have the escape that is sports, it is also very important to keep our grips on reality and not just get lost in the 3 hours of a baseball or basketball game that's going on, and really focus on the matters that are important. So, like I said, find some people that you see talking about this that are either players, coaches, or analysts, maybe, and go from that. I agree. I think Thursday's games will probably be postponed. I wouldn't be surprised if games are postponed until at least Saturday. There's even some talks of maybe canceling the playoffs altogether because I've seen some whispers of players saying they want to go join the protests and leave the bubble, and these are playoff teams that are doing well right now, so that's a big statement.
Yeah, I don't want to speculate too much on what will happen. I don't think the playoffs will just end, but anything is possible right now. We are staying away from the lines in this episode because there is so much uncertainty, and
There's just
obvious.
no confidence in Thursday's games.
Yeah, there's no reason to go into that, but we know a bunch of you guys have some fantasy drafts coming up. Higgins and I have some fantasy drafts coming up. So we do want to talk a little NFL. Obviously, this is not as important as what we discussed at the top of the show, which is why that is the bulk of the show and why that led off the show. But some quick NFL news and notes for all you guys while you're listening to us today. Peter King hyped up Clyde Edwards-Helaire this week while he was at Chiefs practice, and obviously Clyde Edwards-Helaire expected to get the bulk of the carries for the Kansas City Chiefs this year. He proved in college he could catch it out of the backfield as well. Um, Higgins, how high would you draft Clyde Edwards-Helaire in your fantasy draft, knowing that he's right around the top of the second round, end of the first? Like, would you pick him at 6 over whoever else is there, including Mike Thomas potentially?
No, mainly because he's a rookie. I mean, he's got a lot left in the tank. He did not get used a ton at LSU, which was part of the benefit of that got him drafted in the first round in the first place, I think, was how fresh he is and how little of tape there necessarily was on him. But I don't necessarily see him just storming onto the scene and necessarily being the next big thing that like what we've seen with guys like Saquon Barkley or Ezekiel Elliott or Christian McCaffrey. I wouldn't be also considering the offense that he's in. I wouldn't be surprised if he's a more of a pass option back or maybe a change of tempo back. I don't know if he'll get those large numbers of carries consistently that you would want out of a guy that you're drafting in one of those first two.
I'm going to slightly disagree with you here, Higgins. I'm going to say the Chiefs took him in the first round, and you don't take a running back in the first round if you don't plan on using him a lot. So I think they're going to use him a lot. I think I'll speak personally. I have the 7th pick in my draft, in my most important draft, I'll say, and he's definitely on my mind. He's definitely in that conversation. I have not decided that he's my guy, but he's definitely in that conversation. I expect him to be there along with Derrick Henry, maybe a few others I'd be considering, like Julio Jones. So I wouldn't rank him over those guys yet, but definitely in the thought process.
I'd
Something
be
else.
careful,
Oh,
real quick though, I'd be careful how much information you're giving out right now, Brett. You just said you have the 7 pick. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe one or two of the guys in your league might listen in to see what your strategy is going to be. So I'd hold those cards a little close and maybe in the next 5 minutes try to think of a few
other
fake signals to send out there to throw some people off the trail.
Corey Davis. I'm taking Corey Davis at 7. Who else? Robbie Anderson. Robbie Anderson. No, but that's what we're here for. We're here to give some gambling advice, let everyone know the information, right? So you just got to know that if you're drafting around 7 through 10, if you're in a 12 team league, maybe 8 through 12, That's Edwards Hilaire territory right now.
Now, Brett, one of the interesting things in terms of fantasy football for me right now is how varying the team's plans are of who's going to allow fans and who's not. And I think the big impact of where this will be shown is with the defenses. So, I mean, the Chiefs have already said their opening day, they're going to allow 16,000 people in, which is about 20% of their capacity. Um, Jerry Jones has mentioned allowing people in. The Miami Dolphins and teams in Florida have mentioned this. That's obviously going to be a much different environment to play in than one, a regular game that has basically a packed stadium, or two, the other alternative that's going to be from the 2020 season, which is no fans at all. So, how much of an impact do you think fans at certain games but not at others is going to have?
Yeah, no, those are all excellent points. I think another thing that's interesting is like we always assume like dome's a home field advantage, right? Because teams are a little quicker or faster, right? But like maybe it's not that big of an advantage if it's empty. Like who knows? So there's so many things to handicap. I will say this confidently. I'm not as worried about teams going into Seattle. so so at least that I know. I'm definitely not as concerned about Seattle's home field advantage. In terms of like the Jets or Patriots going down to Miami, I don't know how big of an effect it'll have. Would you even go to a game if you could, Higgins? Like I personally, I would just sit at home.
I'd sit at home. The atmosphere is going to be too different, I think, to make it worth it, especially with how high the cost of NFL tickets are. Um, There's also been talk of using artificial crowd noise, whether that be for the games that don't have fans or to just help simulate a full stadium. And you got to think that gives an advantage to the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, their technical team's been using that a little bit longer than
They've had
everybody else.
practice.
They've had some practice with it.
Well, I've enjoyed it in baseball. I think it helps. So
The MLB The Show does such a good job at having such a wide variety of fan noise that it actually works very well for these MLB games. I'm kind of surprised by it.
yeah, no, I think it's. I mean, when I'm watching a game on TV, it really doesn't sound too different to me. To be quite honest, like you notice the fans look a little funky, especially when there's teddy bears and dogs and whatnot. But I mean, you're not even really looking at that. You're watching the game. So it really hasn't been too bad of a viewing experience at all.
Much better than the NBA, which I've heard actually players have complained about the virtual fans because there's a 3 second delay. So you'll score, run down to the other side of the court, and then you'll hear the fans start clapping or cheering or something. So the 3 second delay has been a little bit of a distraction, I've heard.
Oh, I hadn't heard that at all. That's interesting. One thing I absolutely loved about the virtual fans though was when the cameras caught Lil Wayne smoking. That was absolutely hysterical. That made the whole thing worth it to me, to be quite honest. It was just that moment. I was like, done. That's it. It's perfect. Don't change a thing.
What about Benny the Bull in the stands of the Bucks Magic game?
That's pretty good. I liked Steph Curry showing out for his brother at the Mavs game. Dirk Nowitzki showed out for the Mavs. So teams do a good job with that stuff, man.
They really do. And Brett, I see there is one final note in these NFL news and notes that you wanted to talk about before we got out of here, and it involves the New York Giants and Daniel Jones.
Yeah, so two quick things because one's newsworthy and one I think is honestly impressive. Good for him. But Joe Judge made some news in New York on Wednesday saying he wants to remove the red jersey from Daniel Jones so he can take some hits in lieu of there being no preseason action. And I'm going to be honest, Higgins, I kind of think that's a smart idea.
Well, considering the fumble issues that Daniel Jones had, that may be beneficial in teaching him to hold on to the ball compared to the normal practice that there is. Joe Judge has kind of made a name for himself already by going back to the basics of coaching. I mean, if someone messes up, they have to go run a lap. If they do something wrong, they're running a lap. And that just reminds me of high school football in a way. And I mean, is the next step going to be Daniel Jones playing safety?
No, but I really do like the idea of your first hit not being week 1. So, I really I think a lot of teams are going to do that to some extent. Now, I have no idea how many hits Jones is going to take or what player is going to be hitting him. For their sake, I hope it's not like Leonard Williams or one of those big dudes. Maybe maybe you have a soft little corner come in and hit him. But yeah, I definitely think you need to get some hits in before week 1.
I would agree with that, especially since there's no preseason this year. That has definitely left teams up to their own devices in a sense. So, as long as you can kind of mitigate the risk, and obviously it's not open season on your own quarterback, and there's only an occasional hit here or there that will help the player get used to it so that it's not the first hit in week 1. I'm not entirely against it. I would say I'm a little worried, though.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I mean, in a perfect world, your quarterback never gets hit. But I'll say this, Higgins. Daniel Jones showed off some impressive thighs at practice on Wednesday as well. Dare I say, Daniel Thigh Jones and Saquad Barkley? Like, could that be the backfield there?
A quadnamic backfield for sure.
Quad and thighs. I like it. I mean, the two of them. Wow.
Saquons are still unparalleled, though. I mean, you tried having this conversation with me of who's were the best before we started recording. Saquon has the better thighs. His thighs are the most impressive of the entire NFL, to be honest, in my opinion. I mean, Daniel Jones, he put in some offseason work. The man looks like a man compared to a boy fresh out of college like he did last year. He has put on some muscle weight. Still doesn't have Saquon level thighs, though. Not quite.
Well, let's just say they're sturdy enough that you may need a linebacker. I suggested a cornerback trying to hit him. I don't know if the cornerbacks could get him down. Maybe you need the linebackers. But yeah, don't let Leonard Williams hit him. That looks like it would hurt.
I agree. He's a big boy. That would definitely hurt. Well, we don't have a Levy lock or a pick of the pod. There is UFC this weekend, Brett. There is some PGA golf going on. Is there anything you're really looking forward to this weekend that you might be giving out a pick on our social media?
Yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm wishing all these athletes the best with their protest. And I hope we do see some change. And that's really, all I can say right now. We really don't know what's going to happen over the next few days in sports, but like you and I said, we support these players and what they're doing, and we hope that their goal gets accomplished.
I'll say I'm definitely looking forward to the UFC fight night that's going on this weekend, as long as it still does take place. That's supposed to be in Las Vegas. But the two top fights, Robbie Lawler versus Neil Magny, that should be a great one. And then Anthony Smith versus Alexander Rakic. Both of those fights should be impressive to watch. I'll definitely be tuning in for those. But like you said, Brett, most importantly is the protest that's going on right now. The It's been called a boycott. I'd say it's closer to a strike because it's players that aren't showing up for work. They're choosing not to clock in a sense. That's a strike, not a boycott. But best of luck to this. Hopefully, it does raise the awareness that is the intent for it, and it creates the conversation that needs to be had instead of the escapism that comes from watching sports, which so many of us take for granted and missed for so long in this pandemic. But sports are entertainment, and this is a real life decision that needed to be made. And Brett, you and I, we've said it before, we'll say it again. We are on the side of the players with this.
Yeah, best of luck to everyone involved, and we need some social reform.
Well, make sure to follow us on social media at Next Best Bet on Instagram, at NBB Pod on Twitter, and the Next Best Bet Facebook page, because we're going to have some picks. When we know that games are definitely going to be going on, we will give out some picks on our social media platforms. It's just irresponsible to give them out right now when we don't even know if these games are really going to be happening on Thursday. So we will have picks for you when the games are happening. So make sure to follow us there. This has been episode 71 of The Next Best Bet. For Brett, I'm Jake. We'll talk to you again after the weekend.